Mrs. Harper had always been a strict and demanding teacher. Her classroom was a place of order and discipline, where any deviation from the rules was met with swift punishment. The students feared her, but they also respected her. After Mrs. Harper's sudden and unexpected death, a strange chill seemed to settle over the school. Students reported feeling watched, even when alone in their classrooms. Strange noises echoed through the hallways, and objects would inexplicably move on their own. The principal, Mr. Thompson, dismissed the reports as mere coincidence. However, the strange occurrences continued to escalate. Students began to disappear, only to be found later, wandering the halls in a daze, unable to remember what had happened. One day, a student named Emily was found locked in the supply closet, her face pale and her eyes filled with terror. She claimed to have seen a ghost, a spectral figure of a woman dressed in a faded teacher's gown. Mr. Thompson, initially skeptical, decided to investigate the matter. He interviewed students and teachers who had witnessed the strange occurrences. The stories were consistent. A ghostly figure, always wearing a stern expression, was haunting the school. As Mr. Thompson delved deeper into the mystery, he discovered that Mrs. Harper had been fired from the school years ago, after a series of complaints from students and parents. The reason for her dismissal remained a mystery, but the rumors suggested that she had been accused of mistreating her students. It became clear that Mrs. Harper's ghost was haunting the school, seeking revenge on those who had wronged her. She was punishing students for their misdeeds, believing that they were just like the one she had once taught. Mr. Thompson knew he had to find a way to stop the haunting. He consulted with a local psychic, who confirmed that Mrs. Harper's spirit was indeed trapped within the school. The psychic suggested that the only way to free her soul was to confront her and offer her forgiveness. With the help of the psychic, Mr. Thompson managed to contact Mrs. Harper's ghost. He explained to her that her actions were causing harm to the living and that she needed to find peace. After much deliberation, Mrs. Harper agreed to leave the school. She thanked Mr. Thompson for his kindness and understanding. As the sun began to rise, the ghostly figure of Mrs. Harper faded away, leaving behind a sense of peace and tranquility. However, the haunting was not over. Even after Mrs. Harper's departure, strange occurrences continued to happen at the school. Students reported feeling watched, and objects would still move on their own. Mr. Thompson realized that Mrs. Harper's spirit was still lingering, unable to fully move on. He knew he had to do something to help her find true peace. He began to research the events that led to Mrs. Harper's dismissal. He discovered that the accusations against her were unfounded and that she had been unfairly treated. Armed with this new information, Mr. Thompson approached the school board and demanded that Mrs. Harper's name be cleared. After much deliberation, the board agreed to apologize to Mrs. Harper's family and to posthumously reinstate her as a teacher. Finally, with her name cleared and her reputation restored, Mrs. Harper's spirit was able to find peace. The haunting of the school ceased, and the students and teachers were able to work in peace. But the story doesn't end there. Years later, a new teacher, Mr. Evans, was assigned to the school. He was a kind and gentle man who was loved by his students. One day, while walking through the hallways, he felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. He looked up and saw a faint, ethereal figure standing in the doorway of room 13. It was Mrs. Harper, her ghost now peaceful and serene. She smiled at Mr. Evans and nodded. Mr. Evans returned the smile. He knew that Mrs. Harper's spirit had finally found the peace she had been searching for. And he was grateful that he had been able to play a small part in her journey to redemption.